Riverside.
Welcome to Dance Talk with Joanne Carey, where the dance world connects, the conversations inspire, and where we are keeping them real. I'm your host, Joanne Carey, and today I am joined with Megan Williams. I'm excited to have her here. We're going to talk about a lot of good things going on in her career. We're going to talk about her career, her longevity in her career, things she started out with, things she is doing now, and some upcoming events in her career. So welcome, Megan, to Dance Talk.
Thank you, Joanne. It's great to be here with you.
Absolutely. You're welcome. I'm happy to have you. I just like to take a moment always when I begin. First of all, I'm really grateful when I have my guests come on because I'm always just amazed at the people that I get to sit with and have these conversations with. And, you just always never know who you're in the room with.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm just very grateful. So thank you again for being here.
Thank you. Thanks.
You're welcome. Just take a moment, if you would, for all the listeners and just introduce yourself and you a little bit of background about your biography, how you started in dance, the trajectory of your career and where you are now.
So my name is Megan Williams, and I kind of call myself a dance artist now, an independent dance artist, because I work very much as a freelancer in a lot of different capacities. I'm a choreographer, I'm a dancer, I'm a teacher, and all of those things are kind of intertwined as most people's kind of descriptors are in this field. I would say, a 40-year career right now. If you take me all the way back to my early 20s when I first graduated, I'm 61 now, unabashedly that. I went to the Juilliard School in the early 1980s and graduated in 1984 and danced with a few different people who I can talk about, interesting people in my history. By the end of the 1980s, I became a member of the Mark Morris dance group, who I danced with for 10 years, and then have continued my affiliation with as a stager of his work, as a guest rehearsal director, as a guest performer, but in a big project where I came back and was Lady Capulet when he did Romeo and Juliet. He brought back a bunch of the older people. He called us the Antiques Roadshow. and we were the parents, right? We did
valuable, right? We always find those gems on the Antique Roadshow.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, you don't know how much they're going to be worth, but yeah. So I has staged a lot of his ballet works. That sort of became my niche for a while, which has been an interesting trajectory that's led me now to be mostly, even though I've been a modern dance teacher, I taught at SUNY Purchase in the Conservatory of Dance there for 13 years as a modern teacher. I went to grad school in 2013 when I was 50 years old, and after that started pursuing my choreographic career and have gone back to teaching in different places. And I mostly teach ballet now. Ballet for contemporary dancers. So it's been kind of an interesting pathway to where I am now. And I teach ballet at Sarah Lawrence College. I teach it a little bit at Purchase. And I also teach anatomy for dancers, which is something I kind of focused on while I was in graduate school at Sarah Lawrence. So I teach anatomy at Marymount Manhattan College. I'm about to teach it at Purchase this semester for the first time. And I've taught it at a few other places where I've taught. So my teaching career became my primary focus when I first started having children. And I have 2 kids. I live in Westchester County, suburb of New York City, but I very much work in and out of Manhattan. So all of my choreography work is centered in New York City, even though I live in a suburb.
Nice. That's a really full career up to this moment, and you're still having a really wonderful career, and I think that's so important for listeners to hear. I have a wide range of listeners. I have those who are students, I teachers, I have those who have been in the field for a long time. I have a big following of people who aren't dancers who are really enjoying learning about this world. And
That's great.
Yeah, they're being exposed. And so, I always talk about, our audiences, right? We're always talking about the audience. And so it's really been wonderful to expose the listeners to so many different kinds of people and artists. And I just like to point that out because so often we hear and we've heard, I heard it growing up, a dancer's career is so short,
Yeah.
and
I push up hard against that. Yeah, and then you think about all sorts of other kinds of artists that don't use their body as their medium. I have friends who are painters. I have friends who are doing other things where they could do it till the moment they're not on the earth anymore. And I sort of think dancing can be the same. It really depends on. I recently was interviewed for an article about the aging dancer.
okay.
And at the beginning of this article, the writer had interviewed two people, and at the beginning said, Megan Williams and the other person, both over 40. And I questioned it. I wrote back to her and I said, she hadn't sent it to the printer yet, but I said, is there a reason why 40 is this marker? Like, cause I'm 20 years older than that. Why don't you just say Megan Williams, 61, which is because I think that's interesting for people to know that I'm a dancer still. I've been trained and working in evolving as a dancer just as much as I have. It's not assumed that when you can't dance anymore, you turn into something else, a choreographer, a teacher,
Yeah, and I really like that you're pointing that out because I think that's really important, like you're saying. And I always like to push back on that too because there's so many avenues. Some people do continue to perform. I was talking to somebody the other day where the teacher was 92 years old.
Yeah.
And I'm like, that's so amazing.
Yeah.
And that's what we need to celebrate. And
Yeah.
I think we are, as a dance community, opening that up and being more aware.
Yeah, I think so. I think it's always every generation is going to have different biases and stigmas toward, and ageism is prevalent in our culture anyway, but I think it's getting less so just because of how much, we have this social media, for better for worse, really supports and lifts up, marginalized peoples of all kinds, and older people are in that too. Like, so the idea that you stop doing what you do, and I think younger dancers, and I know this from my student, I keep getting older and they're always the same age. They're always 17 to 20, like I always have this pocket of, and getting them to see me not as like that old person who's teaching me this, but it's like someone who knows more than them. And we're teaching in this kind of reciprocity way now, really, in a really like, meeting the student where they are. They have to meet me where I am too. Like, so just because I maybe can't do a certain physical thing that I could do when I was 20.
Yeah.
I think
that's a great way of putting it, the reciprocity of it. Because so often you can, when I say you, I mean, anyone, a teacher can walk into a classroom and you have that age gap. And I age like we're older and all that. I just mean, there's the teacher, there's the student, and there's that distinction made. But I think when you as a teacher do have that reciprocity, I think it opens up a world inside the classroom of such growth. I have a cat too. I love that your cat is visiting us.
She's never done that before, but that's fun that she's up there.
Maybe here's my cat, because my cat's at the door meowing. I'm sorry, but
okay.
I do find that does open up a whole world, and I think at times, often that brings the students into a space where they feel comfortable You know, it doesn't mean there's no respect or there's no discipline. It
Yeah.
doesn't take any of that away. But
Yeah.
it's just the way that then the instructor, the teacher, the choreographer can learn too. When I'm in that situation, I love to absorb and learn from my students too.
Yeah.
So,
Oh, I tell my students all the time. At the end of a semester, I say, thank you for teaching me. I
mhm,
said that to them. And
yeah,
that, and that's kind of a new idea. Still there's a lot of young people coming from very competitive, intense studio kind of scenarios before they go into college learning. And they haven't necessarily been exposed to that kind of thinking about learning. And to me, that's part of becoming an adult, is learning how to work intergenerationally, like so that like it's hard because I have two 20-something-year-old offspring, two kids who are adults in the world now. And when I teach my students who are in that young age range, I'm older than their mothers now, which is really interesting to me.
mhm,
And they find that interesting too. I don't bring it up,
yeah,
but when there's that aha moment, like it's like, oh, Megan is dancing around in front of me, doing all these things, like is older than my mom.
yeah,
But the idea that I'm learning from my students is the only way that I'm interested in teaching.
yeah,
Period. Like it's like I'm not teaching to be the person who knows more than everybody. I'm kind of developing my craft by being a teacher. That's always, I've been teaching since I was quite young. Like I think not everybody's called to teaching.
exactly.
There's not an assumption that if you quit dancing you become a teacher. So that happens.
Yep,
It's not always a good idea.
yeah,
Just saying, there's definitely some people that maybe shouldn't be, that don't have the disposition for teaching, because it requires a lot of different
right.
skills, like patience and respect for young people, and of willing to learn about like the contemporary aspect of what young people are going through today. I think more graduate programs for teaching in higher education should have like young adult psychology. Like you should be learning more about brain development and things like this. There's not enough hours in the day though
Yeah,
to
no,
learn all those
I know.
things.
And also I think how to teach. Like I don't, because we do what we learned or we saw our teacher doing.
Right, which is not always a good idea to keep doing.
No,
Right.
and so how to and have those types of, I've always been interested. I've always wanted to, me personally, I've wanted to do that because I've had a good response to the kind of teacher I am.
Right.
Just and from my staff that I've had. And I always thought, not, this isn't about, I mean, the podcast is about you. It's not about me. I'm just sharing with you that I would love to be able to do that, to teach people who want to teach how
Right.
to how to enter that world, because
Yeah. No,
I
I mean a lot of good graduate programs have that sort of pedagogy aspect, but honestly it's not the biggest focus. I think, as I look at higher education, which I've been involved in for, 20 plus years, um I think it would be important if there were like the great programs like NYU Steinhardt but it's really focusing on K through 12, like it's focusing on teaching dance in the schools, which is great. My friend Deborah Damask, who runs that program, we gave her an award, the Martha Hill Dance Fund. If I want to plug the Martha Hill Dance Fund gala here as well. But we gave her an award last year, but getting people who want to become college educators to really learn,
yeah.
like you said, like take what they know from the teachers that they had that were really good and be able to assimilate all that information. I don't know if there's a perfect system for that, for teaching teachers.
Yeah.
I think I'm always teaching teachers when I'm teaching young people
Yeah.
too.
Yeah.
Like I always I like my anatomy students, I say someday you might want to teach this information, so they do a lot of presentations and things where they have to teach their peers. I think all young people in who are students who are learning choreography, it's good for them to make pieces on each other, like how you want to be treated. You treat your peers this way and you're going to learn how to do it. I mean, you kind of learn by doing,
You do.
basically. You
Especially,
get thrown into the fire and you learn by doing.
yeah. Let's go back. I'd like to go back when you
Sure.
were learning at Juilliard.
Yes.
So let's talk about that because, you hear that word, you hear the term, you hear the school, and you're immediately, at least that's my reaction.
Right.
But
Yeah.
I think that is a reaction because it's impressive. Can you talk about that? And does that, when you look back too, and you think, wow, I came out of that school. That's part of my story. Can you talk?
Yeah. I mean, it's an interesting thing because it's a name that does spark attention, and it's prestigious, and it's a place, like, certainly when I moved to the suburbs and people around here that were friends of, my small children's parents, um, I'd say I'm a professional dancer, but I'm taking a pause while I have children, and they'd say, oh, they wouldn't understand what I did, and then I'd say, and I went to Juilliard, and they go, oh, like it sort of legitimized me, even though I have to say, there's tons of great schools.
Yes, of course. Oh my goodness.
Like there's no there's like, and I know what those grades, and they're all over the America and the world, but when I got into Juilliard as a young, naive high school student, didn't really, there was pre-internet, obviously. So the cachet of Juilliard was really it was a music school, and only if you were kind of in the know in the New York area did you know that it was a music school, and then it was a dance program, and then it was a theater program. And by the time I was there, of course, it had moved to Lincoln Center from further uptown. And, in the drama department, like, people I went to college with are movie stars and Tony Award winning actors and writers and all these, like you can become a famous celebrity at a Juilliard. If you graduate as a dancer from Juilliard, you don't become a famous celebrity, but you become someone who's affiliated with a really important institution. So, but I think most people, when they graduate from college, they don't, like, we all push away from where we just went to school because we want to become professionals. And it took me a while to come back as an alum to Juilliard and kind of really realize how special it was. Yeah, it was an amazing time. I mean, it was, as I said, I was kind of a naive. When I was in high school, I was doing mostly jazz dance, and I was sort of a theater geek in high school. And I had a few people saying, you're pretty good at the dancing thing. Like, maybe you should pursue that. And I didn't even know what that meant. Like, I was really pretty clueless about it. And luckily I met someone who kind of mentored me into the audition process. And then I was like fully immersed. I hadn't done much ballet. I'd not really done a lot of American modern dance. I tasted it here and there. So I was a pretty goody student. I just did whatever I was told, and I was not particularly rebellious, where I had peers of mine who were, back in the 80s, the people that were being brought into the dance program were lots of different ages, lots of different body types, lots of different experience. I had 3, 4, 5, 6 people who were foreign students in my class alone. And people in my class who were like 5 years, 6 years older than me.
Okay, wow.
Like, it was really like, it was not, there was some of us who were right out of high school, and then there were these other people who'd gone to college somewhere else for 2 years. So it was very different than it is now. It still was as rigorous, still was as prestigious. We still learned an incredible amount of, repertory that still mind blows me.
Wow.
That I learned from the people I learned from, who are kind of history book people. So it was a good time. And I also just got really connected to lots of people, and the web is bigger, and it's, now I'm communicating with Juilliard grads who were my friends, many of whom became well-known in the field, and many of whom went on to other amazing things that had nothing to do with dance, which is not atypical. So
yeah,
it was a great time.
And then from there, what did you do next out of Juilliard?
So what I did next, so when I was a senior at Juilliard, I was cast in a work by Alvin Ailey called Streams, and the work was staged by a woman named Mari Kajiwara, who was an Ailey star at the time. She was also Ohad Naharin's wife. And so the year after I finished Juilliard, I started dancing with Ohad. And Ohad had a company in New York for 4 years that I was in called Ohad Naharin Dance Company before he moved back to Israel to take over Bat Sheva, where he is now, when he's Ohad and Gaga technique and all these things. So I had that chapter, toured. We went to mainland China, we went to the Netherlands, we did some interesting things and toured around the States. At the same time, I was dancing with a company called Glenn Lund Dance, which was run by Laura Glenn and Gary Lund. And Laura Glenn was a Limon alumni who recently, became a good friend. She taught at Juilliard after I was a student there for 30 years. She had ran the White Mountain Summer Dance Festival for 30 years. She's unfortunately is not well now, but she's a good friend to many, many people. So I was in her company. Those were my two first freelance jobs, in addition to dancing with like some peers of mine, from my friend Mark Haim, who graduated from Juilliard with me, more or less, was an up and coming choreographer. And I was a fitness trainer. I was an aerobics teacher, and I was a personal trainer when the advent of personal training, when people in the early 80s, when we were all wearing striped leotards and leg warmers, and yeah. So that was my first kind of work, was just struggling to be a young artist, making ends meet by deciding not to be a food server, but to be a teacher. So I was teaching exercise and fitness and dancing with Ohad and dancing with Laura. So
I'm sorry, I didn't mean to.
that's okay.
When I'm hearing that, and about the fitness and teaching that, don't you think that aided your anatomy? Like,
oh well, it started that interest. It's definitely started that interest, because I was working at a fitness facility in the Regency Hotel on Park Avenue under a woman who started it, who was kind of a personal trainer to many wealthy business people from that era. I don't want to name drop some interesting folks that all the guys who did 60 Minutes, like Morally Safer and Mike Wallace, all those, Barbara Walters. We had people like that, and some like Upper East Side celebrities, fashion people, things like that. So it was kind of a close clientele, but it was run by someone. Her name is Marianne Battistone, and she was a Laban movement analyst person who became a fitness person. So she hired dancers to be her training staff, and we had weekly anatomy meetings, and I was kind of really learning it in a wash through way, like it was all new, because at Juilliard, when I was a dance major, we didn't really study anatomy. Like that was still in the era that you weren't quite doing that. It's completely changed now. Every college student studies anatomy, does somatic studies, does all these different things, cross training. We didn't do any of that. We were just dancing till we dropped. If you had a backache, you didn't tell anybody,
Yeah, exactly. Can you go back to Laban? Because I had a very small, introduction to that, because I went to, while I was dancing and, doing finding my route, I went to acting school, and we had a teacher, I can't think of her name right now, but that's okay. But she did some Laban.
Where did you go to acting school? Did you go to AMDA?
No, I went to American Academy of Dramatic Arts. Not the musical school, the one on Madison down, like Midtown.
Okay, because I taught briefly at the one uptown on the Upper West Side in the Ansonia, subbing for a woman who was teaching actors Laban movement analysis. I was helping them with monologues, like embodying. Because it was kind of a thing for actors. So I did a little bit of that teaching, again, like trial by fire, like, can you sub for these next 6 weeks? Here's the curriculum. But I was learning all that, and Laura Glenn was a Laban person too, so her company work, I was learning all of that, and so this woman I did it from, maybe it was the same person, Carol Conway, someone named Carol. Does that ring a bell?
I have to go back because I can see the face, but I loved it. And wait, there was somebody named Audrey.
Yeah.
Last thing right now. I can't think of the other woman. She was
But I was teaching actors. Like when I was like 23 years old, I was teaching actors.
Right? Yes. And I
Yeah.
was always eating it up because I danced,
Right.
and they would, like I loved that little, we had, I guess it was our one semester of Lava we had. And I can't even say we had Lava. We had like, it was interspersed.
Yeah, well, it's a way of really like, and who does that really brilliantly right now is Alexandra Beller. I don't know if you know her. Alexandra Beller is a CMA, a certified movement analyst, and works with actors in theater and does choreography and theater work. So she really uses that material, that effort, shape, flow kind of material to get people into like physical states that actually develop character, and like if you have to play someone older than you, or like whatever it is. And so so I was doing a little bit of that work. I never went through that full training, because then I got into Mark's company. So like my teaching kind of pursuit, which was, I had a little window like most people do in their 20s where you're not getting any full-time dance work, so you think, I'm not going to dance anymore, like this isn't going to happen, all that, blah blah blah, you feel woe is me, you keep going to auditions, you keep getting cut, etc. And so I was thinking I was going to become a physical therapist. Like that was where my head was going, because it was so interesting to me to work one-on-one with people. But then I went to, like, in 1 week, I went to like 3 auditions, and I got 2 jobs. Like it was one of those things where, okay, maybe my time is, and that's often, I'm always telling young people, it's like, just when you think things aren't going to happen for you, be more prepared and put yourself out there, and something's going to come your way. Doesn't mean you can't quit if you want to quit, but don't quit because you've put too much time in. So so that's kind of my story. So it wasn't until later that I started taking anatomy coursework with Irene Dowd. She was, so that's how I kind of got back into the thread of my anatomy interest, and doing these sort of intensives with her. And she was teaching every summer a teacher's intensive up in Toronto.
You heard that name, you were like, Irene,
Yeah. So I studied with Irene for years in these little modules, because I was always too busy the rest of the year, but I would do this every, I think, 6 consecutive summers. I took a summer course with her in Toronto. And and that just led me down the path. By the time I went to grad school in 2013, my anatomy teacher there was one of Irene's protege people. Her name's Peggy Gould, and that's what led me to feeling like teaching anatomy to college dance students is something I can do when I don't dance anymore.
Yeah.
Like I was thinking, I have to have something that I can age toward. And it's like it's so humbly, it's the hardest thing I've ever taught. I can walk in and teach a dance class with my eyes closed, but to teach an anatomy class, I have to be thinking and preparing, and it's challenging, super challenging.
I want to go back though to Mark Morris. So when you got into the company, no problem. Into the company, and tell everybody what that was like. Let's talk about,
Yeah, so that was a cattle call audition back when those things still existed. I still have the piece of paper with my number. I was number 400.
Wow.
It was a huge audition because this is 1988. He was kind of just on the map a few years, and everybody was excited. And Arlene Croce in the New Yorker wrote like a big piece about him. And he was offered this kind of once in a lifetime thing in Belgium, which was to take over the Belgian National Opera dance. Maurice Béjart was leaving, and there was this slot, and the man Gérard Mortier, who was the director of the opera, the Monet, had seen Mark's company performing and said, "This is my guy. This is the person who uses music this way. I'll give him an orchestra. I'll give him space." So Mark was given a budget, and he hired he had his dance company, and then he doubled it. He added like 12 more dancers. And I was one of those new dancers. And so initially I was hired as a supplementary dancer for the first big project. I wasn't in the company directly. I had a 4-month contract in Brussels. I was in this huge piece, L'Allegro, Il Penseroso ed il Moderato. I don't know if you've seen it. It just came back to BAM a couple of years ago. Big, big work. And then was asked to join the company like 4 months later. So
wow,
that's how that happened. I auditioned with a whole bunch of people. It wasn't like I knew somebody who recommended me or anything. It just sort of,
I just and I think too, because I didn't know that. I didn't know that part of the story, and so I think for listeners too, I mean myself, but listeners too, to hear that it's just that like one thing that changed his trajectory.
totally. Well, he would not have made the big works that put him on the map. Were completely financed by Belgian national arts subsidy, which doesn't exist here like that. So it allowed him to think big and to expand his sort of connections through the rest of the world. And then the company moved back to the States in 1991 as this other thing. If that hadn't happened for him, I don't know what would have happened. I mean, I think he still would have had a good career, but I think it launched. It was an opportunity that he couldn't say no to, and it was worth it, because some of the bigger works of his that are still standing, The Hard Nut, which is his big crazy version of the Nutcracker, that whole thing, the sets, the costumes, all of that was built there.
Wow.
With a budget that was there, not here, which is crazy. And now he has,
How long were you with the company?
So I danced with the company as a full company member for almost 10 years.
Oh, okay.
And then I had my first child in 1997. And that next year, or while I was pregnant and into having a small child, I was Mark's assistant on a Broadway show that he was working on. So I was working with him, for him, but not as a dancer. I was, behind the table, being his assistant. And then I tried to come back on the road a little bit with a child under my arm, and it just didn't work. It wasn't that Mark didn't want it to work. Like, and he's I think been pretty good about children coming back, women having babies and coming back into the company. He has no bias against that, but it was a personal thing. Like I just didn't feel like I could take care of my body and be really ready to do the work in a way and still give full attention to my child. It's difficult. I have a woman working in my work right now who has a 2-year-old, so I'm really, really conscious of her time and what she can and can't do and how she's feeling any given day. It's because it was challenging. And so I decided to not push that. And as I said, I came back as a guest some years later when my kids were a lot older. And then started.
And when did you start creating your own works?
So, I think I started choreographing when I was in high school. Like, I've always wanted to make things, but at Juilliard, you were either a dancer or a choreographer back in those days. It's not true now. Like, I think all students are encouraged to choreograph now, but I think it really started in earnest when I started teaching at Purchase, which is not far from where I live, SUNY Purchase, in where are we now? 2000, like 2000, 2001. And my kids were small and I was teaching, but once I started teaching a lot, I thought I could still be dancing. My body feels like it wants to be dancing. And so I started making small solos on myself. And eventually, and I was choreographing on students a little bit, and then occasionally someone would ask me to make something. So I kept it quite small scale, and mostly it was about my own desire to dance. I just would make things for myself. And then I commissioned a couple of solos thinking I'd do a solo show, just how I could fit motherhood and performing in. It was not with a lot of people. You know, I didn't see myself like all of a sudden having a company or anything. Finding the balance between family life and performing. So I would say it started in there, like in the early 2000s. And little by little, I realized I was kind of a choreographer. Like I had no big ambition, like I'm going to go out and make, you know, huge dances. Yeah, I can say that now that I've been doing it for a while, even though doing it on any kind of scale has really only been in the last 5 or 6 years, you know, or 10 years now. Now I forget what time the years go by. 10 years.
Oh, right. Especially with the pandemic. It was just like it's.
Oh, I know. I lost so much time.
Yeah. But, and let's talk about that because you have an upcoming show coming up.
Yes.
April. So let's, and if I understand correctly, but you know, correct me obviously if I'm wrong. This piece that's going to be, is it premiering in April? Was it supposed to before the pandemic or?
Yeah.
First of all, tell everybody what it is.
Yes. So I am premiering a new full evening length work called Smile Though Your Heart Is Aching. And it's a collaboration dance and music event with composer Yves Buglerian. And I can tell you about Yves in a second. Back in when I first finished grad school in 2015, I started making some work out in the world again in New York City. And I was drawn to Yves' music. I was looking for female composers because I felt like there was a lack of choreographers using female composers. And she's someone I went to junior high with in Los Angeles, right? I'm from LA originally. And even though she was a little bit older than me, we weren't friends because she was older than me, which, you know, back in those days, you know, when you're young, that gap is big. But she's a famous composer. And so I was looking and there she was. And so I reached out and I said, I'm in grad school. I'd love to use your music. And she's like, oh, you know, aren't you the person I went to junior high? You know, and since then we've forged a friendship. We've become friends. Yeah, which is great. And so I started using her music. She asked me to then perform with her in an event where she was playing the toy piano and I was just improvising. We did a couple little things together in the 2016, in that range. And so then I started developing an idea of doing a full evening with her music.
Wow.
And we were ready to go, close to ready to go for a March 2020 premiere.
Okay, yeah.
And we were just 3 weeks away from the show, being able to put the music and dance together when we were told to lock down. And so I have, a video of the final run through. I have one dancer missing who was out of town at the time. My lighting designer was supposed to come that day. And I said, I think you shouldn't come because we're not supposed to be touching each other, and then we did this big run through and I made a video that said our shows are postponed.
Wow.
We'll let you know in a couple weeks what happens. Everybody wash your hands, but so what happened is it didn't happen. So I put all that in that content on a high shelf and paid everybody, musicians and everybody's like, I'm sorry, we had the night of that would have been the opening, we had a Zoom party, one of those early Zoom things where it was still a novelty. And then I did a bunch of other different things. I didn't feel people were like, oh, make a movie of it, do all these things. I didn't feel pressed to do it differently than I'd planned. And then I did a couple of small things. I made a film in the park. I did, I was trying to keep the dancers kind of engaged the best we could. And one thing led to another. I was commissioned to do some small young people's chorus of New York, reached out to me. Some people were reaching out to me to do video things. And so I kept choreographic juice flowing, but this kept getting further and further away, the Yves Buglerian show. Until this past summer where I just had an aha moment. I thought, I'm ready now. for whatever reason, to resurrect it, and it's completely different.
Okay.
So I knew that we're all different. We've changed utterly. Most of the dancers are still in it who were in it 4 years ago, except for a couple that have moved away. And some of the musicians are the same. So we've tried to keep intact a lot of the creative team. But it's developed into a completely different kind of work, which is exciting.
That is exciting.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know, often when you even if you're recreating a piece, like say there's a piece of because I know you that as well, you know, for Mark, isn't it for Mark Morris you do?
Yeah, for Mark, I'll restage works of his, yeah.
Or something, you're still keeping that, even you're still staying true to that. You know, what I like is that you're staying true to the original vision, but you're letting it grow and become what it's meant to become.
Yeah, I mean, it's an interesting thing how you say staying true. Like, am I staying true to the original vision? I don't know. Like, in a way, when you're making something, you have to be willing to let things go. Like I think that was what we started to do. So in October, I sort of set up who wants to start working on this again. Let's have some sessions where we just look at archival material. Let's look at the videos. Let's see what we loved about this, what we didn't like. Let's remember why we were making this part. And so we even went back further into some of the research time of it, like not that final run through in March 2020, but like the summer before, when I was starting to just germinate some ideas, which never made it into that version. And we're like, oh, let's go back and do that. And so we had a really fun time, the dancers and I, in October, kind of, and reteaching, like, let's all learn so-and-so's phrase. Like, we all love that. Let's do. And so we were kind of reteaching each other material. And the dancers were amazing because some of them could just like get up and do it. Like, it's been 4 years, not, you know, like 5, 6, 7, 8, let's do it. It was something in their body, like, oh, I remember you said this, or I remember we decided it was, because it's very collaborative how we work. Like, I make up material, but they enhance it with their own juice, you know. So that's where we started in October. And then Eve and I started working on what the musical landscape would be. That's really what's changed the most, is that it was more of a repertory show before, with like different pieces of her music. This is one piece of music that's a lot of small things that's all has one overarching theme to her. So that's kind of where we're working from now.
And I just think that whole process, I love process. Like, I really love that. I love all the background, the process, that final product. I don't know, you know, people don't realize all that goes into that final product. And then
I wish people could know. Sometimes I feel like,
that's why we're telling them.
Sometimes I feel like the process is more interesting than the product, you know. But that's what's great for us, you know. Like, we all know that because we're in it. So, I mean, it's my job to make the product interesting too. But
it's homework. Yeah. I can call it like the subtext, story, all those undercurrent things of all those choices that you know, and so I think that's really lovely. Now, is the toy piano, because I found that fascinating, is that part of this music, or is that something totally different?
Yes, yeah. The toy piano is actually it's only in one part of this score now. In the other version, it was used a few more times, but because that's one of the first time I performed with Eve was at a place in Queens called the Knockdown Center, where it was part of like a bigger art day, where she was sitting on a tiny stool playing the toy piano, and I was doing some improvisational thing around her. But she's going to be playing the toy piano in this one. It's part of one of the pieces of music. The music is it's from a series she's done. You know, she likes to think of it as an anthology. She started making these small pieces of music, small, like 3 to 5 minutes long. They're short. Started making them in 1986, the first one. So it goes back a little bit. And the most recent one she's working on now, 2024. So it's the span. And they're all reflections. This is where things get heady and kind of scholarly. They're she's been fascinated by a 14th century composer named Guillaume de Machaut, who's a medieval poet composer.
Mhm.
And she takes something of his work, like a poem or something he set to music, and she takes it and makes it contemporary. Some of it with electronics, some of it with vocal, some of it with different instruments. And so she's created these pieces over many years just as kind of a pastime of hers.
Wow.
And this is one of the first times they're all going to be performed.
How interesting.
And I'm creating it using them in the order I want to make the dance score, which is really cool. And so the themes within that have to do with love and desire and hope and loss and conflict and perseverance and the strange ways that men and women used to relate to each other then. And she's taken that and looking at it now through lots of different lenses of gender and other things, you know. So
interesting.
Yeah, that's where we're at.
The title then, so because I love the title, like I just love that. And how did that come? How did that?
So the title, Smile Though Your Heart Is Aching, that's a song you probably know, right? Smile though your heart is aching, which was written by Charlie Chaplin.
I did not know that.
Yes.
Wow.
So for one of his films, because he wrote all the music to all of his movies. I don't know if you know that either.
I know that.
Yeah.
Wow.
So, so one of the poems, the French poems from the 14th century, has an opening line. I don't know if you speak French, but it's
actually
L'imment me déport, like I carry myself, like basically I'm smiling even though ... everything's going wrong. So she took that French tune and the Charlie Chaplin tune and smushed them on top of each other. So there's one piece of music that's that, where you hear the smile though your heart is aching, just that one line repeating through while this other French loopy thing is happening. Electronic loop. And so it felt like
I mean, really,
yeah. So that's just one of the short pieces of music, and it felt like when she and Eve and I were thinking about titling it this time, because it had a different title.
Okay.
In 2020, because it was a mashup of a bunch of things that sort of stood out, sort of because of like how the world is right now, how we're all seeking joy, even though there's so much tumult around us. And then we all have our own personal struggle, you know, with things going on with family and health and things and then there's the gendered thing where we're always asked to smile, like people on the street tell you to smile and you're like, I don't want to smile, you know, like, so the idea of like smile though other things are happening, that's felt like an interesting, you know, and sometimes it's good to give a work a title, even if, and go from there. So it's become kind of the umbrella for all these other feelings of kind of intimacy and emotion that are kind of embedded in the how the dancers dance together, how they touch each other, things like that. So that's where
what are the costs? What's the costuming like?
So I just had my first meeting with this wonderful costume designer who I've never worked with before, whose name is Claire Fleury, Fleury. And she's done some great things with some other choreographers, but she also does sort of performance art things. And we're right at the beginning of that process. So her imagination is pretty wild. We're looking at, I had a meeting with her the other day, starting with just color ideas. And so, and I was looking at the color palette in the 14th century, which was fairly limited. It was like natural dye, so we've got like indigo and deep blood red and ochre mustardy color. Like we're going to kind of go in a palette that so it's not going to be neon or anything. Like it's going back to another time, but working with lots of different sheer fabrics, and we don't know yet what it is.
That sounds, I just love the research and the depth and the layers that are going into this, because I think that's what fills out a piece. And like I just said earlier too, you know, people, I'm glad, you know, the audience is listening and hearing this.
Right.
I think
but you used the word subtext. You used the word subtext a minute ago too, which I think is interesting because I can tell you that these are the colors of medieval times, but that's kind of hidden. Like we don't want to. We're not going to be dressed in medieval costumes,
Right.
you know. So it's going to be contemporary, but yeah, but there's like a nod to the history of where all this came from, and that's kind of fun to do that research. And like I was even looking at like what did underwear look like back then?
Okay.
And it's a lot. Like they wore lots of layers of stuff.
Well, we wear such little things.
We wear such little things, and they were wearing so many things. And also, like men wore dresses and skirts and things. So that's kind of an interesting because we are playing with gender, and I have people in the cast with different gender identities, and so it's sort of nice to kind of tap into, like, get away from what people expect someone to be wearing and see how that can be pulled out in a way that's where the dancers' bodies are seen, and they're seen the way they want to be seen. Like over time, I've really learned how important it is when you're working and collaborating with dance artists is like you want them to feel really comfortable, like literally comfortable, like this is too tight or whatever, but also how they're being presented, how it aligns with how they want to be presented in the world.
Yeah.
Because back when I was a kid, it was like this is the costume, here, suck it up and wear this white unitard or whatever it is.
I'm glad you're saying that. I'm glad you're honoring that, because I remember a couple times where, because I dance in a company, and when we're off camera, I'll ask if you know, because you might know.
Okay.
But I would voice like if I didn't feel comfortable in something. I mean, we all, how we all go into those, like, oh God.
Yeah.
I just remember one particular time I was put in a costume, and I was like, I had this like moral dilemma, where I was like, I can't wear this. Like,
I'm sorry.
Yeah, but I didn't wear it then. Like I said, I felt comfortable enough to go and say I don't feel comfortable in this. I can't.
Yeah, that's great.
Stage, like, and they respected that, and they changed it, like, because we were there being pinned, and their costumes were being made for us, and they were all different,
Right.
And I was like, I'll give you this. It was like this was my costume.
Oh.
And I was like, where's the rest of it?
Oh gosh.
So I was always very protective of that, and I had mentors in my own life and career who always said, you don't ever have to do something you don't want to do.
Well, and I think we have to, I don't think I was told that early enough.
Yeah.
It's definitely something that, and luckily not a lot of damage was done, but I feel like, it aligns with all aspects of consent.
Yeah.
Like, I feel like and dancers are very vulnerable people whose bodies are out in front of the world, and if we can't protect and kind of honor what people need and want, and how I won't even separate body from them, how they are presented to the world. And it's, you can definitely have a buy-in. Like you can say, okay, I'm a choreographer, I want to do this dance, I want everybody topless. Do you want to be in my dance?
Right.
And they'll say nope.
No.
Or but you can't do that thing, because I've heard plenty of stories, like you can't do that thing where the dancer goes to the costume fitting and goes, no, absolutely not, and they haven't been given any forward knowledge of what's going to happen. So anyway, part of this collaboration is I already went into the costume designer first meeting. We've had one meeting only, having spoken to the dancers already. Like I'm not going through the back door. Like the dancers I've shown some pictures to the dancers, and I've had a couple of them say, I would wear that. And then one of them goes, I wouldn't wear that, So I think we're, and I've shared that with the designer, so that it's really important to me that all the dancers have a unique presence in the piece, and also that they're durable costumes. They have to be able to roll on the floor and be lifted and do all the things that we're doing, and have them not fall apart. Like they can't be so precious. It's not like a Halloween costume that you only wear once. They
gotta last. Yeah. And so
Yeah.
tell everybody when, where.
The shows are April 5th, 6th, and 7th,
Right?
2024,
Mhm.
at the Mark Morris Dance Center in the Duffy Performance Space, which is Mark's 5th floor. It's the studio where his company rehearses, but it transforms into a proscenium-like theater, with risers on one side. We're keeping it fairly open. We're not bringing in we're not going to have wings. So
Okay.
we're not bringing in, and the musicians are on in the performing space. They're not isolated in a pit or in a side space. So they're very integrated into the visual aspect of the
Nice.
show, because it's as much a music show as it is a dance show. So
There you go. That's exciting. That's exciting.
yeah.
Is there anything else that we covered so much? Is there anything I haven't? Oh, there is something. Wait, I want to ask you about. Is it 10 hairy legs for hairy legs?
Oh yeah,
Because
because in New Jersey.
yes, and Randy.
Yeah.
Because I served on the board of Gas New Jersey with him while he was on the
Oh, okay.
at the same
Okay.
time. I mean, I was on that board for 5 years. And so when I saw that, I was like, oh my gosh, because there's always some connection. Whenever I have a guest on there,
Right. So
connection.
like, yeah, my hat's off to Randy James and 10 Hairy Legs and Betsy Sobo, because that was my first commission after grad school.
Oh, okay.
Was I applied, you submit an idea, and I was given a commission and a budget for costumes. That was kind of my first one that were,
Yeah.
where I wasn't doing it by myself,
Mhm.
which was great. That was back in 2016, I think. And one of the dancers, I made a quartet. One of the dancers in that piece is in my work now.
Oh, nice. See?
Robert Mark Burke, who's also a New Jersey artist.
Okay, the names.
Or he doesn't live in New Jersey anymore, but he did for years. Yeah. Yeah. So Robert is a 10 Hairy Legs alum and is in my work still because I adore Robert. Has been in a bunch of things of mine. And yeah, very grateful to that 10 Hairy Legs experience that piece stayed in their rep for a few years, which was nice. It wasn't just a one-off, like they liked it, and it stayed in the rep for a little time. And then we were about to do it with live music somewhere in Virginia or something. I can't remember exactly where, like in the spring of 2020.
Oh my God.
And then 10 Hairy Legs just closed up shop.
Yeah. That's a pivotal time for so many people, right?
Yeah, it was just a time. Well, and if an organization was trying to reinvent itself, which was really, it was a moment for people to reinvent themselves.
Yeah, that's what I think.
And some really successfully did that, and others realized, there's not a space for me to reinvent myself now. So that was what happened with that organization. But I'm super grateful to 10 Hairy Legs.
Yeah, I didn't want to forget to mention that. But
yeah, no, I'm glad you did, because and I, again, I have a friend and a colleague in Robert now that I wouldn't have had I not done that experience back then. So
is there anything that I left off? Anything you want to share? Any words of wisdom you want to offer?
Oh, words of wisdom. Oh, I don't know. I think it's important in this field to not worry about what other people are doing, to be inspired by other people, but also just, and I'm giving myself advice right now to not get caught up in the flurry of images on Instagram and the idea that like someone else just got a grant or someone else just is doing an amazing thing with so and so, and you can lift those people up, but you can also lift yourself up by not worrying about competing in that way. And I think that's an important thing to remember, because if you do just like go into the studio and put your mind to your work, you're going to make the thing you want to make.
Yeah.
If you're always worrying about, is this going to be liked, or is this as good as so and so, then you're not going to make the work. You're just not even going to get to the work. So that's my advice.
I like it.
Again, I'm going to try to heed my own advice
It's
moving forward.
It's recorded, so you're going to have
forever, for posterity. Yeah.
Oh, well, Megan, it's been great having you. Thank you for joining me on Dance.
Yeah, thank you. I really appreciate your time. And April 5th, 6th, 7th.
Yes, it's coming up.
And the tickets will go on sale later. They're not on sale yet.
You know,
And you can go to my almost updated website, meganwilliamsdanceprojects.com. So that's how you will find me. And I also am on Instagram, Megan Stimulate. Yeah.
very good. Thank you so much, Megan.
Thank you.
This is Joanne Carey. We're guest up with Joanne Carey. Follow us, like us, and share, share, share. Thank you, everyone.
Powered by Riverside.